Hello, my name is Emma McDonald, and today I will be discussing Beth L. Bailey's article, Prescribing the Pill, The Coming of a Sexual Revolution in America's Heartland. The learning objectives for this article are as followed. You should be able to understand how the pill revolutionized sex in the 1960s, identify how college women were able to gain access to the pill. You should also be able to identify who helped those college women and women across the U.S. gain access to the pill, specifically two examples. And you should be able to explain the pill's significance to unmarried women and married women in the 1960s, and also explain the pill's significance to unmarried women and married women in the 1970s. Beth L. Bailey's main idea and thesis are as followed. By giving women greater control over their sexual and reproductive lives, this new contraceptive technology helped change the meaning and experience of sex in America. For the supporting evidence, I broke it down into two separate time frames: supporting evidence for the 1960s and supporting evidence for the 1970s. Considering that both aspects are different ideals, I wanted to take the 1960s first as what people used to think of women when they were on birth control or trying to get birth control. And then I wanted to take the 1970s and show what people were starting to think about the pill, whether it was a woman or it was a male, and how women were able to get access to the pill. So the first bit of supporting evidence is when the pill became available for contraceptive purposes in 1960, Lawrence doctors had begun prescribing it to married women. So basically in Lawrence, Kansas, you were only allowed to be prescribed the pill if you were a married woman. You could not be prescribed the pill if you were single by any means. Like you were not allowed to have it at all. Now, this next supporting piece of evidence comes from an actual anonymous letter that was written to the local college in Lawrence, Kansas. It was mass produced by the school newspaper. She said, or he, I've seen too many girls on campus totally disregard school for several weeks as they suffer anxiety over a missed menstrual period. If a girl takes one chance a year, that's enough to warrant taking the pill. So basically, he or she, since it was anonymous, basically describes that they had seen women on college campuses completely blow off school for weeks on end because they missed their period, and they were trying to figure out what they were going to do next, whether that was get an abortion, which was not readily available, or drop out of school and take care of the child. And of course, I fully agree with, if you want to take that chance once a year, you should be allowed to have the pill, regardless of if you're married or single, or of your age. When a young single woman sought a prescription for contraceptives in the 1960s, she was making a statement about her sexual status. Virgins didn't need birth control pills unless they did not plan to remain virgins much longer. I included this in the supporting evidence because I wanted to show you guys how people viewed young single women back in the 1960s. People believed that young single women kept their virtues intact and had to until they were married. They didn't believe that they should be allowed to have birth control, because if they were taking birth control, then they were planning on having premarital sex. A lot of that was not the case. Some of it was the case. And, it was to each their own. Those women were allowed to do what they wanted with their body. But unfortunately, society didn't agree with that philosophy. And the final piece of supporting evidence from the 1960s is still others complained of menstrual cramps or heavy bleeding and came away with the pill prescribed to regulate their periods. Basically, young single women, specifically college-age women, or even young women out of college that were still single, use different ways to get the pill. They either complained of heavy menstrual cramps, extreme bleeding, or they would even go in and be wearing wedding rings saying that they wanted to be put on birth control because they're about to get married and all this kind of stuff. So they had to jump through a lot of hoops to get birth control just because they were single young women. It had nothing to do with them wanting to take control of their menstrual cycle and control of their sexual being. It was they had to find a way to get the pill regardless of the outcome. They could be denied or they could get it. And it was as easy as a yes or a no. So moving on to the supporting evidence from the 1970s. So this is when you see a real significant jump in views on birth control. This is when you start to see a lot of women supporting other women trying to fight for the right to have birth control access for everyone, no matter your marital status or your age. Obviously, older teens, not younger children, but and it was also, there was other people, not just women. There were men supporting the ideas of these women for trying to get the pill. So the first piece of evidence is in the early 1970s, the women's movement captured the pill in both its symbolic and its physical manifestations. So basically, they took something physical, such as the pill, and made it a symbol for the women's movement. That pill was basically utilized as a way for sexual freedom and taking control of one's sexual being, and controlling their future. Whether it was, to control them having children or to control just when and how heavy they would bleed every month. It's as simple as that. Both made claims based on the rights and needs of women themselves and not on those of the larger societies. In doing so, they stepped outside the discourses of morality and of the population problem and centered the debate over access to the pill in a discourse on women, rights, and freedom. This again goes with the notion of sexual freedom. The women's movement took the pill and used it as a way for women to have their right and their freedom to sex, and to use the pill as a way to protect themselves while having sex. It was not simply the right to access these women claimed. More important, these women were rejecting the frameworks of sexual morality and population control that had governed access to contraceptives for more than a decade. So, obviously, sexual morality back then was you were not supposed to have sex until you were married. But once the 1970s hit, even before the 1970s, women were starting to have sex before they were married, but they didn't have any way to protect themselves as individuals, except for when a male used a condom. And, obviously the population control, some of these women wanted to have careers, they wanted to go on with their life and do things before they had kids, but sometimes they would get pregnant by accident because they didn't have birth control. So the pill was taken as a way to control the population, and when women can control to have their own children, whether it was sooner or later, whether it was your early 20s or your late 20s. And then the last piece of supporting evidence from the 1970s is the following month, the Supreme Court ruled that women could not be denied contraceptives on the basis of marital status. So basically, in the 1970s, that is when birth control truly became accessible to all women, regardless of your marital status. You could not be denied for the pill because you were single. You would automatically be able to have access to the pill. So an example that supports Beth L. Bailey's views on birth control is birth control advocate Margaret Sanger. This information I gathered is from the PBS piece Margaret Sanger, 1879 to 1966, from the collection of Women in American History. It catalogs her life. It explains things that she did while she was still alive, and even things that her legacy after she had passed. Margaret Sanger was born in 1879, and she devoted her life to legalizing birth control and making it universally available for women. She attended nursing school to help women who needed it the most, like her mother did before her untimely passing when Sanger was 19 years old. Margaret Sanger's mother unfortunately passed after having multiple children, and she couldn't control. Obviously, she had no control over when she had those children or if she had the amount of children that she did. Margaret Sanger founded the American Birth Control League in 1921. It wasn't until 1951, though, that she found someone to create the magic pill. So 30 years after creating the American Birth Control League is when Margaret Sanger found someone to create a magic pill that was a female form of contraceptive, a female-controlled contraceptive. That person that she found was Gregory Pincus, who was a medical expert in human reproduction, and someone that helped not only Margaret Sanger but also Gregory Pincus was Catherine McCormick, and that was one of their sponsors soon after Margaret Sanger found Gregory Pincus. Before Margaret Sanger died, she achieved her goal of bringing safe and effective contraception to women everywhere, no matter their marital status, class, or race. She was able to create a pill that was, a female-controlled contraceptive. Granted, it wasn't until 1970, and it wasn't until the 1970s that it was actually accessible to all women, but she was the reason behind why birth control was produced and made. So the discussion questions and student activity. I want you to think about a couple of things, and you can write them down, and or you can think about them in your head. So I would like you to think about what two political movements helped women gain access to the pill. What group of women gained access to the pill first, and explain how the pill was the byproduct of those movements. How complicated was the process for women in the 1960s, specifically college women, to get the pill? So how many hoops did they have to jump through? What kind of hoops did they have to jump through? What examples did they have? What examples can you think of that they had to do to get the pill? And lastly, do you believe anything has changed since then? Do we have easier access now in 2021 to the pill, or is it just as complicated? Well, I want you to think about whether it's your personal life or someone else that you know. How easy was it for you to get the pill? Or how easy was it, or how hard was it for someone that you know to get the pill? But that is all that I have for you today, and here are the works cited page. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I hope you learned a lot about Prescribing the Pill, the Coming of the Sexual Revolution in America's Heartland by Beth L. Bailey.